Hello, folks. This is your boy Chuck, and it's going to be only Chuck today. Again, it's one of those days where Omar's just busy. He's just busy. I was going to come up with a cool story that he was stuck with Basil Rosewater from Joyce Conspiracy Theory and some kind of interdimensional battle with some evil beings, but I was like, nah, I think we've said that joke a little too much. It's a burnt joke. Hey, we got a new episode today, and on today's episode, we have a very interesting guest. His name is Drew Gathia. He has his own podcast called The Radical Christian, and it's an amazing podcast. I've been listening to it kind of like religiously. As soon as an episode pops out, I'm usually driving, and usually I drive for like 45 minutes, and those episodes are about that long, so I can just like immediately consume that podcast, and it's filled with information. It's great stuff. Welcome to the show, Drew Gathia. What's going on, buddy?
What's up, man? Thanks for having me.
Not at all, man. It's been a pleasure listening to your show, man. Like I said, it's like so listenable. You know what I mean? I'm like, oh my gosh, all the stuff that we talk about in this like more, I don't know how to say it, but like just digestible. Like, I don't know. It was perfect. I think it's a perfect setup, and I'm like, cool, man. I really, really like that show, and I want to get him on, because you talk about a lot of stuff that we talk about, and you just got that information ready to go. Your notes just boom, 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 boom. You know?
Yeah, thank you. I try to pack in everything needed to understand the topic as quick as possible, so nobody has to kind of like bridge the pieces together for those topics.
Right. Before we get into the show, though, tell us, who is this Drew Gathia?
Well, this Drew Graphia character is a former medieval times knight. I used to be a jouster sword fighter.
What?
Yeah. Yep, did that for 10 years in Buena Park in California.
Wow, like I think I was telling you before the show, when you said that, I was like, wait, I think I seen you. I might have seen you. Would have had to, right? Because you said you were doing it every night?
Oh yeah, that I was pretty every night I worked, I was in the show. So if anybody went to Buena Park Castle in the last 10 years and they look through their pictures, they'll most likely find me in there.
That's interesting. That's crazy. I've always wondered, like, are you like, are there some people that take it real serious and they're like even backstage, like method acting, you know, like all the way through, or is it just everybody in the back goes like, all right, what's up, dude, bro? Like, they just break character, or how is it like, man? Give us behind the scenes, bro.
Okay, I'll give you the dirt. So backstage, it's just a big like locker room vibe, and we actually have like a little literal locker room, but we take it serious out there. But behind the scenes, it's just messing around, having fun. It's a real fun environment.
That's cool, man. That is crazy. I got to tell my sister I'm gonna go through her pictures, because she used to go there so much, you know.
Yeah, that'd be funny if you found a picture of me.
Oh my gosh, that's cool, man. And
we might one together.
Possibly, because she was all about taking pictures with all the knights and stuff. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
So that's crazy. That's really cool, man. So, what made you like decide, like, hey, you know what? I got to do this podcast and start talking about. Well, in our community, we consider these topics to be a bit fringe, because it's not your regular Sunday church preaching kind of stuff. You know what I mean? And you know, like, I don't know what happened. What did you hear? What, you know, kind of, you know, steered you down this path of doing this podcast, The Radical Christian?
So when I got saved, when I started that whole process about 2010, this is the stuff I first heard. So this.
Oh, what?
So, yeah. So like,
dang, you came in hot, bro.
Yeah. Well, I mean, I heard the basic stuff, but then I had a friend who actually he would always talk to me about God. But then when we got into this stuff, I was listening. He showed me Russ Dizdar, Steve Quell, and L.A. Marzulli.
Oh, God.
So I was like, man.
Bro, that is a red pill moment. Like, that is so ridiculous. That's literally, your friend was Morpheus, and you were like, red pill. Boom, and you just took it, dude.
Yeah, and what helped was at that time in 2010, there was a bunch of like, heavy spiritual stuff going on to me. Like, I was having sleep paralysis. I was having weird stuff happening to me. And then, so I would listen to Russ Dizdar's Shadow of the Darkness podcast, and it would talk about it and say how to get rid of it. So for me, it was just like, oh, this is just how it is.
Right.
So it kind of started down that vein. And then, when I did hear stuff about the Bible, or I did read it before I was like officially saved, I would see stuff like verses mentioned satyrs and stuff. And I used to play like a lot of games when I was younger. and I knew what a satyr was, and I was like, wait, isn't that like a giant goat demon?
Mm-hmm.
And it's just casually mentioned in this Bible verse.
Mm-hmm.
So like you see little things like that, and then you research them, and I guess that's how I got into this facet of Christianity.
Wow, that is really interesting. That's crazy. Yeah, it was totally different for us. Me and Omar, I don't know if you heard any of our episodes or, through any other podcasts. We've been on a few other ones, but like
Mhm.
we were in a cult, and it was a Christian cult, but it was like, the Bible wasn't studied too well, not at all. It was very used very specifically to kind of manipulate, and so me and Omar, we would read these throwaway lines, like you said, satyrs and like the lion men and of Moab and things like that, like all these weird things, and like, oh, what's a Nephilim and what and things like that. We were just
Mhm.
always asking questions, and the answers were, oh, don't worry about that, or oh, don't let the devil cloud you with unnecessary information. You don't need to know that, and blah blah blah, stuff like that. That was our answers that we would get from our church. So it's like, we just knew about it, but like we didn't know what in the world it was. You know what I'm saying? And it's just interesting for me to hear that that's how you started. And we were at that place for like, I don't know, almost 20 years. And so
Oh wow.
yeah, it was like a long time, and same kind of information, but we found it through Coast to Coast and different things like that, because Ellie Marzulli was on and different things like that, and we Googled that, later when Googling was the thing, we Googled what is Nephilim and Genesis 6 and all that stuff, and then boom, that's a whole another chapter in our lives, and but that's just crazy that that you started like that, just coming in hot, like I said, man, that's crazy.
Yeah, and like the same with the Genesis 6 stuff. Once you read that, it's just like the wool's taken off your eyes. You're just
No,
like,
yeah.
okay, well now I can't look at this any other way.
Right, it's hard to unsee,
Hmm.
I totally agree. And so, okay, going on that, let's talk a little bit about your sleep paralysis before we get into your show and stuff like that, because actually you talk about that in your show, but
Yeah.
I used to have it myself. What was your experience like? Because I've heard, both, people that I actually like and read their books, like Christian, scholars that don't agree that sleep paralysis is a spiritual thing, and there's others that are definitely on board, and there's a little bit of both on both sides, and for me, I mean, oh, give me a second, something happened here. Ooh, I don't know if you heard that. Did you hear that?
Uh-uh.
That was like a weird popping sound, huh? Everything got extremely loud, huh? Anyways, it where was I at? Oh yeah, so me, I could say, me and my family were kind of practicing. Unfortunately, we were practicing some magic, for a
Hmm.
while. And after we started practicing, these rituals, things started getting very crazy, like paranormal crazy at our house, right? And one of the first things that started was I used to see suddenly like this shadow following me, and I could see it on the right side always, or sometimes on my left, but it was usually always on my right side. Like
Oh,
there's,
dude, that is so interesting that you said right side, and I'll tell you why in a little bit.
oh, okay, and and I kept like just seeing it, and I turned, and it just kind of like would like whoosh away, like it was gone, and then I'm like, okay, and then I just kept seeing that, and then we kept doing our thing, and it kept popping up, and then it escalated to hearing like my name, or kind of um audible voices, but I couldn't tell what they were saying. It sounded like conversation, but I couldn't tell what they were saying. They were like kind of things like that. Kind of
Yeah.
like when you see in scary movies and you're like, oh, that's relatable. You know what I mean? Like it's just like just like this little whispering going on. And
Uh-huh.
I was like, okay, that's getting weird. And then finally, like it was getting more like there was just calling my name out. There was like, and then it just kept calling my name, like, hey, Chuck, hey, like, and I was like,
Jeez.
what the heck? And I was like, all right, whatever. And then the worst it got is finally I was going to sleep, and I started to hear things kind of move in my bedroom, but it was dark, so I couldn't really tell, And I figured, it's just a house creaking, whatever. And then from there, it went to like I could see one shadow over me. Like I would open my eyes, and there was like a shadow over me, right? And
Wow.
and then it was two, and then it was like a group of shadows, right? And they were looking at me, and I can kind of see their faces, but it wasn't completely like um I couldn't tell, like I couldn't sketch him out. It was like almost not a face, you know what I mean? And
Yeah.
and and then in those moments, I would get like some major sleep paralysis, and I was just like done, like completely still. I could not move, right? And I didn't know. A lot of the times, I didn't know. I mean, I just kind of waited until it'd go away, and it was like an all night thing,
Oh,
until
jeez.
until I found out like later that I told my mother, and she was like, "Oh, we got to do something." And of course, us practicing ritual magic, we were like, "Well, we need to do more ritual magic." You know what I mean?
Ramp up the spells.
Yeah. And so, and that's kind of what we were doing. And so, like, it got worse. And then I think the worst I had it was like I kind of felt numb, and I felt the sleep paralysis come on a little bit. And this time it felt different though. I felt like I was numb with fear, you know,
Yeah.
and I was so afraid of whatever was going on in the room, and then the bed started shaking, like vibrating, you know, and
Oh man.
I was like, "What the heck is going on here?" You know, and then I don't remember how or why, but like I finally decided, like, okay, oh, I remember why. We started to go to a Christian church, well, the church that we turned out to be a cult, but one of the things that they actually did that was a bit weird, but also kind of introduced me to spiritual warfare was like praying against evil, like praying against the devil, you know.
Yeah.
And I was like, okay. I remembered, and then I like prayed to Jesus. Like I tried. I was like, I tried to get it out the prayer, and I finally just
Yeah.
was able to, like you said, I just get Jesus out, and I started to pray, and it like went away, you know. And then it would come back, and every time I would pray to Jesus, like it started going away, and more, until it just like few and far in between, and it was like a prolonged process. It was like weeks, months, and then after a while, it just kind of never happened again, you know. And I gotta
Yes.
say, in the last years, maybe it almost happened once, and then I was like, nah, I'm not about to have this, and I just started praying,
Exactly.
and it's gone. You know what I mean?
Exactly. And that's what sacred namers need to understand. We say the name of Jesus and it stops. If they want to say it's a sacred name that only they know, it's like, well, the name Jesus worked for us. So that's a side note. But yeah, it's funny you said the right side, because the very first time it happened to me, it was when I was like going. I was joining this. Actually, I forgot about this, but so I heard the Holy Spirit's voice, and it was just a quick, or not quick, but just a simple, very light. It was just like it said to me, "Play bass." It just said "play bass," but I'll explain why. So I was going. I woke up super early. I was about to go do. I was in trouble at the time, so I was going to community service. My life was chaos, and then God was kind of telling me it's time to be a Christian. So
Mm.
as I was getting ready to go to my thing, I was sitting there and I was just listening. I was looking at music on YouTube before I went to my thing, and this was early in the morning. And then as I'm having my own thoughts, as I'm listening to music, this little still small voice says, "Play bass," and I was like, "What? What's that?" So I call my friends who I grew up with, who one of them was a Christian, and he still is. And I'm just like, "Hey, I think I want to play bass." And this is when I broke my arm really bad, and this is when I could barely move my hand, and I was just like, "I guess I'm gonna play bass." But long story short, I ended up joining their band. It was a worship band, and then I went to this Bible study and ended up getting saved. So that's a short version of that.
Mm. Mm.
But while I was going to go to that first Bible study, I was laying in bed at my friend's house because we were going to go in the morning, and this is 2010, and I was just sitting there sideways. I sleep sideways, and then something kept pulling me to my back, very slight, like, and slowly.
Mm.
And I was like, man, like, why do I keep leaning back? Am I just out of it right now?
Mm.
And it kept slowly pulling me back, and I straightened myself out, slowly pulling back. Then on like the third time, I kind of I just let it happen,
Mm.
which, because I didn't know what was going on. I was just like, man, what's going on? And then as it was happening, this voice said to me, in my friend's voice, it says, "When I sleep next to you, I like to sleep on your right side."
What?
Yeah, and I was like, what? And then boom, slammed me on my back, locked me up. All my air was sucked out. and it just felt like a board was across my whole body, like
Yeesh.
pressing me to the thing, to the bed. And I didn't know anything about this. I didn't know what it was. I just felt terror rush into the room. And then all these thoughts. And then actually, this is when I heard the enemy's voice. Now, I'm not saying this was Satan. I'm just saying someone
Yeah.
from there came,
Right.
and it said, "Your arm's never going to get fixed. You're never going to go back to work and do your job. You're never going to do this, this, and that. Your girlfriend's going to leave you. You should just kill yourself." And it was quick
Whoa.
and it was aggressive. So I heard both voices. The Holy Spirit was just light, and it was just play bass. It was simple. It was a non-intrusive. It made itself clear, but the other one was like overbearing and like bah, 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 just kill yourself. And I was like, dude. So that happened, and then with the other sleep paralysis stuff, I've had it grab my chin and slam me backwards where my back was like arched, and I was like
Damn.
bent. Yeah, and
That sounds like an abduction right there, bro. You can't.
yeah, and then
crazy.
something else crazy happened. I actually talked to Josh Peck about last week or the weekend before last weekend, and he's like, "Oh yeah, that was something to try to take you out of your body." But I had my hand just start vibrating violently, just like, and I heard a hum.
Yeah.
And I was like, what is going on? Because all this stuff was happening at once. I didn't know what it was. But and then he's like, yeah, that happens with astral projection. That's the start of it. And I was like, but I wasn't practicing it. And he's like, something was probably trying to get you out of there. So just weird stuff like that. But then this is why it's so important not to divide over differences in beliefs, unless it's like about Jesus, obviously. But
Right.
so there's people with PhDs that say it's a biological occurrence, and you and I know for a fact it's not,
Right.
because we felt it come into the room. We've your heart starts racing. You feel like there's a cloud in the room, and a heaviness. So if we were to divide with that person and be like they're wrong, and then ignore all the rest of their teachings, it's just dumb, because
Yeah, it is.
not everybody has all the pieces, and that's why we're all part of a body.
Right. No, correct. I'm glad that you say that now, and you also say that in your show, because there's definitely a lot of differences in the research that we do, that you do, in these books that we read, and some of them just don't really. I'm like, okay, well, I don't agree with that, but let's move on. You know what I mean? And
Yeah.
but on top of that is the biggest difference is, like you said. Does Jesus change in their perspective? If it does not, if he is God, if he is who he is, as according to the Bible, then it's okay. Let's do our research and let's find out. Other than that, let's just have differences of opinion. It's no problem.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah, but okay. Well, you want to continue on that story on yours, or I should say, did you get rid of the sleep paralysis? You know what I mean?
Yeah, once I started listening to Russ Dizdar and Steve Quell and Ellen Marzulli, Russ would talk about, get rid of it in Jesus' name. And then like one of the aggressive times where it just held me and pushed my head back and like locked me up. And I just felt something on my chin. It was crazy, like something just grabbed me with a clamp or a claw or something. But all I could get out was Jesus. That's all I could get out, and everything stopped. And then you can tell, because the fear leaves the room. You're still kind of like shook, but you're not like, you don't feel this heavy gloom in the room, and you feel it leave. And so that's not biological. The same thing
Right.
with like alien abductions, when sometimes they're stopped in Jesus' name,
Yeah.
which is a fact that is just now getting out. But a lot of scientists wouldn't touch that fact, or a lot of like these people that research it wouldn't touch that fact, because it would like ostracize them from their groups,
Right.
the other ufologists.
Yeah.
But it stops that too. So it's like,
Right. Yeah, there's a
it's all,
very interesting book called The Communion. Have you heard of it?
I have it. Yeah, I've only read like half of it, but I have it. I've been meaning to finish it.
Okay, yeah. And that, amongst other books, other researchers, like official UFO researchers, not just your Joe Schmo, like people from like MUFON and things like that, and have stumbled upon this research, which is really interesting, that, hey, so I'm about to get abducted. I'm getting like, sucked up by my chest, the classic blue light, you know what I mean? And then they pray to Jesus and boom, it stops. You know what I mean? And it's like, what? Why that name? You know what I mean? Why does that do that? And of course we know, because the spirits behind, or the entities behind these supposed aliens are interdimensional evil. Like, it's evil, behind it. And of course we talk about that on this show, and you kind of, touch on it a little bit, but it's related. If people don't know, a lot of the stuff that you talk about on your show is actually related also to the alien phenomenon, but you got to start connecting your own dots, folks. You got to do that research. You know what I'm saying?
Yeah.
But here we go. All right, let's get into your show. The first episode I heard it. I was instantly hooked, just like that. Boom, you got me. And I was like, dang, this guy got me subscribed, And so it's episode 1. It's called The Nakash in the Garden of Eden, and it's a bit touchy for some Christians, it's a bit touchy subject, because in the world of Christianity, we know we have people that are literalists, hyper literalists. We have people that are a little too liberal, and so forth and so forth. And thus we have, all these denominations, all these interpretations because of that, and a lot of the times we use all these different hermeneutics in order to interpret the Bible, and then we forget to use the most important thing, the context of the culture of the time. You know what I mean? And when we don't do that, then, we can make all sorts of, I suppose this means this, I suppose this means that, and things like that, because we're putting into it our modern day thinking of what that might be. I actually heard someone say something. I told this story before one time. It's a crazy story, and I'll just give you an example of how bad taking the Bible out of context can be. This guy, he was a friend of ours, not a friend, an acquaintance. I knew him, but he was struggling with drug addiction, and he was trying to leave all that behind, and he could not let go of cocaine. Like, he was just really addicted to cocaine, and he was asking God, hey God, deliver me from this, and he got to the point where he felt that even in his head, for some reason, he felt like God maybe just wanted to, or was going to allow him to be in that life, to be, it's okay, just do your cocaine, but believe in me, kind of thing. And he was trying to look for some biblical scripture to back up this idea that he thought was like a God-given idea, and he read that scripture, and I always misquote it, but he goes, from dust you were made, and from dust to dust you will return, and of course, you read that in Spanish, and in Spanish, dust is like another name for cocaine. It's like booger sugar, you know what I mean? and so the that's the whole thing. And he read that as, oh, okay, well, I used to do that, and now I'm going to return to it. You know what I'm saying? And so he obviously, thank God, God sorted him out, and he didn't continue until it killed him, but he definitely actually used that verse to perpetuate the idea that God was okay with him doing cocaine. You know what I'm saying? And that is a really extreme example, but unfortunately, that's why we have cults and all these different denominations, because people take one verse, literally could be one verse, and it changes the entire context of the whole story, and we have problems there, So that being said, keep that in mind, that what we're going to mention today is not Drew's context. It's not Chuck's context. It's the context of the Hebrew people, of the person who wrote that book in that time. Is what we're trying to figure out, what's in the mind of the person who wrote this book, And when you do figure that out, when you look at the language in the Hebrew and the Greek, you start seeing a story, a narrative that connects throughout the entire Bible. So let's get into it. Episode 1, you talk about the Nakash in the Garden of Eden. So kind of expand on that one right there. Just start blowing our minds. Make it seem like we're in your episode right now.
All right. So the Nakash, there's multiple things going on. There's a literary device of the people at the time where they would talk about someone as if they were an animal because they exhibited those traits, and it would kind of relate them to that animal. So you had that going on.
Mm-hmm.
And then you also, with the name Nakash, it's noun form, it's adjective form, and it's verb form. Those are all very important because this is a triple meaning. The verb form is to divine, like a diviner, like divination.
Mm-hmm.
The adjective, I think, means it's shining one or burning one.
Mm-hmm.
And then the noun is I forget the exact one on that one, but it's all three of these meanings apply to a divine being. None of them apply to a literal snake,
Right.
because you see stuff throughout the Bible, because seraph is the Hebrew word
Oh,
for
so
serpent, snake.
let's go
Go
right
ahead.
there. What we say Nakash right now, and the listener might not know what that is, but in the book of in the story of the Garden of Eden, that's what we're talking about when it comes to the snake, correct?
Yes.
And so when it says snake, because I want to kind of make people aware of this, because it's in my opinion, for me, a lot of the stuff that you have is a good also apologetic tool. You know what I mean?
Yes. Yes.
Because and people might not see it that way, because one of the arguments atheists have is like, oh, you believe in a talking snake, you know what I mean? And that's like
Exactly.
always the thing. Oh yeah, well, you believe in talking snakes, you know? And I'm tired of hearing that, you know? And then, you know, when I early on in my faith, I was like, well, yeah, you know, snakes can talk, I guess, you know. But I mean, but now it's just like,
Yeah.
no, that's not what the Bible was saying. This nakash, or this snake, which is how it was interpreted in English, has a much deeper meaning, and that's where we get the word serpent or snake from, is from this word nakash, correct?
Yeah, and that's the thing when people say like, "Oh, why does this stuff matter?" Because I guess the topic is fringe Christianity. That's what we would relate this stuff under,
Right,
even though it shouldn't be. But that's just for lack of a better term.
right.
But people say like, "Oh, why does this matter? Why does it matter if giants were here? Why does it matter if there's watchers? Blah blah blah." It's like, okay, so if you ask why does it matter, the details about the snake, that's because for a lot of people this is a roadblock. This is right in the beginning of the Bible, and when they see a talking snake, they're just like, no, this is I'm not. This is a fairy tale. I'm not down for this.
Right.
So this is why this stuff's important. Now, I remember when I was younger, I thought I was a Christian. I really wasn't. I just thought like, oh, I'm a Christian. I guess I am. Until I got saved, I became one.
Right.
Um,
It's like
but when I
culturally,
was,
you know, you're like a cultural
yeah,
Christian. Yeah.
exactly. And then looking at this, I was always like, man, I can't wrap my head around this. I don't know why there would just be a talking snake. But so when you get into the actual word nakash, like I said, the noun version means serpent, and seraph, another word, it means the burning one or the serpent as well. And seraphim is a class of angel, and they're described as, six wings. They have depictions of them always as burning ones, or bright on fire, and anything burning and on fire like that is associated with divinity.
Mm-hmm.
So, and then you also have them described in other places with serpentine appearances.
Mm-hmm.
And so now you learn about the seraphim, and you see that these are divine beings that have a serpent. They're described with a serpentine appearance at times. So then you flash back to the Nakash, who's also described as a serpent, whose name also can mean, burning one, and the adjective means diviner, which fits the term of a divine rebel, teaching divination. That's what the Watchers taught when they came down. That's one of the things.
Mm-hmm.
So you kind of combine all of these, and you see that all of these apply. They fit within the context of the people at the time, as this quote unquote serpent was a divine being, capable of speech. I don't think it was a snake sitting there that could speak, and then it got changed to be like all the other animals. I
Yeah.
think it was a divine being, and
Yeah,
it,
I hear that a lot actually, and it's like, oh, and now snakes crawl on their bellies, like they take it very literal, you know, and
yeah, and
it's crazy. Like
okay,
just one little bit of word study, and you'd realize just one. It's like it also tells you sometimes where how deep someone studies. You know what I mean?
yeah,
Because I'm like, dude, that's one word. One word you could have studied, and you would have understood that that's not talking about a literal snake. You know, and it's I mean, be diligent, folks. Like I'm sorry, I might be a bit accusatory here. You know, like hey, but like it really is I guess a soapbox of mine where I don't like when people. I used to do this a lot, which is why this just kind of touches the thorn a little bit. I'm like, oh, kind of like it just hurts because I used to do this. I was very zealous about teaching the Bible because of the place I was in, the other Christian organization I was in. But it was 100%, almost 90%, to be more literal, out of context, And I was zealous about it. I was so zealous. Like I would go up to people and like, you have to do this, you have to do that. And it was completely not even what the Bible was talking about. But I believed it to be so. And I was teaching other folks. And that's the other danger. It's like you can, especially as someone who's called to be a teacher or a pastor, like you have a serious responsibility with the Word of God. So I would really take it a little step further, and do the research necessary, so you're not teaching something that isn't there,
Yeah, and there is a responsibility. And when you first become a believer, if you don't have that proper guidance, which a lot of us didn't have, your zeal overtakes the proper steps we need to take to get to our goal.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
But guess what, man? It worked out. You and I are here where we're at now, where we're kind of, the dust is settled.
Yep.
Yes, we're still zealous for God, but we're not. There's other steps that we take into account now, and there's research that we're able to do. We kind of know, we kind of have our bearings now, and we have a better place to go forward from.
Right. And that's the beautiful part, because despite all the mess that we might have created, God turned something good out of it, and here we are, like you said. So God is always good, and He kind of turns everything back around right where it needs to be. You know what I mean?
Yep.
Yeah.
Yep.
So, let's expand a little bit more on that, Nakash.
Okay, so then when you realize this was a divine being, this now paints a completely different picture of the Garden of Eden. This now shows you, okay, what was this divine being doing in the garden? Did he work there? Was he set as a guard there? Uh-huh. And why would they do this? So then you open up the picture of, okay, so there's a race of divine beings. One of them either hated humanity so much or hated God so much that they caused humanity to fall. And then that opens up, okay, who are these other divine beings? And you get into the divine council. Mm-hmm. And then you get into all that. Then you see, okay, God has a family in heaven of divine beings. Right. And there was some sort of falling out there that bled into our story. Because I know they have I'm positive they have a full story of their own with God that's lasted a million times longer than ours, since before the world was created. Right. So we get our Bible, we get our humanity's story, and then you see theirs bleed into ours, and then it just opens up this whole other realm of mystery where you're just like, man, I wonder what their story with God is. These are our heavenly brothers.
Right. And you know what? For people that might have not heard that Heiser episode, you want to explain a little bit what's the deal with the divine council? Because they might have not heard or even thought that God has a council working for him.
Okay, so the Bible talks about other gods in a literal sense. And now when it talks about other gods, it's a small g God, as in it's not the same category as our God. Our God is the God, but there are other gods. And the reason why you get that is from the word Elohim. So Elohim is a plural word, but it's used in a plural sense and in a singular sense in Psalms 82, where it says God sits among the gods. And he judges them for ruling unjustly. Now, Psalms 82 people need to look at, and Deuteronomy 32. So Deuteronomy 32 is at the Tower of Babel incident where all the nations didn't want to follow God. So he's like, okay, you don't want to follow me? Fine, you'll follow my sons. So he divided up the nations after the Tower of Babel incident, gave them all different languages, and he divided them up according to the number of his sons and put his sons in charge over them. So his heavenly beings. Now, some of those sons ruled unjustly, and they started to become their own God. They started to elevate themselves to the level of the God of the Bible, and they started to get worship. They started to, trade knowledge for women and do all the stuff that happened with the Watchers. They started to do all that kind of thing and set up their own realm, their own kingdoms of, we're the Greek god so and so, and that's where you get all the pagan religions from.
Yeah, and so, saying that and understanding that, this is what if you didn't catch it, this is what we're saying. Other gods are real. Now, don't get triggered, because like Drew said, lowercase g, okay? The Bible has one creator God, yes, but God also created these other beings to work alongside with him as a council. Some of them rebelled. those rebelled, and they also wanted worship from people. Kind of like Lucifer wanted to be worshipped, wanted to be the best, wanted to be on top of everything, above the Most High. But so that made them get kind of casted out, right? And so because of that, they became what we understand as the pagan gods, or the other gods, any other god besides the biblical Hebrew God. So Zeus and his group of gods that he has, which interestingly enough also has a council, right? And other gods have councils too. Like even what's interesting? Like, I don't know if you noticed, but even like in the Mormon understanding of God, they have that little council set up, because it's like this whole thing set. I'm like, interesting. Just the way they set up their whole thing. They have a council, and there's all these. If you look into ancient religions, there's like this one leader god. Then there's a separation, and then there's these other gods ruling. And it's like, dude, that's the biblical story of the rebellion of the council of God, And when you see that, when you start connecting those dots, you're like, oh gosh. And that really blew my mind. Honestly, like it was like a week, maybe 2 weeks of me thinking like, oh my gosh, these gods are real. Oh my gosh, these gods are real. Oh my gosh, you know what I mean? Because this whole time you're thinking, oh, every time it says gods, those are just idols, Those are just idols. But like you said, something very important, Psalms 82, God, when it says Elohim and Elohim, plural, God wouldn't say, oh, I am, above other idols, other non-existent beings. He wouldn't say that, because that's ridiculous. Like, of course you are. Those things are just idols, He's comparing himself to these other beings, and he's saying, look, I'm above all of them, I'm above these guys.
Yeah, and Psalms 82, the verse we're talking about is 82, 6 and 7, and it says, in the ESV, you can see it clear as day, it says, this is God's speech. I said, you are God, sons of the Most High, all of you. Nevertheless, like men you shall die and fall like any prince. So if that's talking about men, it wouldn't say like men you should die.
Right.
So it just doesn't make sense that way. And now this is when they were set up over the nations, and they ruled unjustly. They didn't rule. So they're created in God's image as well. And they're supposed to, and being created in God's image means you are supposed to act as he would. You're supposed to you're supposed to be a copy of him, basically, and live out how he would, live out his life here, to summarize it. So they didn't do that.
Right.
And then he judged them and sentence them, which will be fulfilled in the day of the Lord. But when you look at these texts like this, you can really see the deeper meaning. That's why you need to look at the Hebrew words. You especially with Google now, you just look up Psalms 82, 6 through 7, Strong's Concordance, and you can see every word piece by piece, and be able to do your research like that.
Or I recommend Logos Bible Software, $4.99.
Yeah.
It's like an app now. It's so usable. It's crazy.
Yeah,
but
and who knows how long that'll be around, like this kind of thing,
right.
In this generation. But you also see in Daniel 7, 9 through 10, it's this whole scene, and it towards the end of it, it's talking about God, and it says thousands of thousands served him, 10,000 times 10,000 stood before him, and then it says a court sat in judgment, and the books were opened. So he is a God of order and justice. So it only makes sense that he has a court. Now, if you look at what he told Adam, tend this garden, cultivate this land, take care of these animals, and multiply. It's not that God didn't have time to do that, or that was secondary. It's not that he needed Adam to do that. That's that order that he wanted. That's what he created us to do. That's what he wanted us to do. Same thing with his heavenly beings. He created them to help him in administering judgment and decisions. And you see that in a verse with King, I forget where it is, but it's about they're going to judge Ahab. King, you know what it is?
I think it's in Kings. They're trying to judge the king, right? And God asks his council, how do we judge him, right?
Yeah, it says what should we do with Ahab, basically, and then they were suggesting things, and one of them says, I will be a lying spirit in the mouth of his prophets.
Right.
And then so God said, okay, let it be so. And then so this watcher suggested something, or I don't know if he's a watcher. This being suggested something, and God approved it and sent him on his way.
Right.
So could God not do it himself? Did God not know the answer, and then this being just thought of it? No, it's he's letting them be a part of it. I like to think of it as when your dad sits you on his lap when he's driving the car and you help steer the wheel,
Mm-hmm.
it's like you're not steering it, you're not actually doing it alone, but he is letting you kind of get the feel for it and have your part in it.
Right,
You know,
right.
so
And
it's kind of like that.
it's interesting because what we're seeing here is God created the earthly realm and us earthlings, us humans, to subdue the earth in a godly way, which is a whole nother rabbit hole, by the way. But and we have these sets, this authority, these things but we have to do it in a godly way, imaging God, as you said earlier. We have to image God in a very specific way, and these beings do the same thing, but in the heavenly realm. At least they were supposed to, right?
Yeah.
And we have this kind of back and forth where you can see that God has created different beings, and they all have different things to do. And he wants you to participate in everything that is creation, whether it's in the spiritual or in the physical realm. Anything that could be experienced. There's a something or someone or place so that we can all experience this wonderful creation with God together, right? And that's kind of sometimes what we miss. And it's funny that you bring this up. It's good that you bring this up about the Ahab story, because these beings, it's kind of a can of worms when God chooses a guy who says, or the watcher or whatever exactly he might be, when he says, well, I'll be a lion spirit.
Yeah.
And divide the whole council, or divide the whole people. And he pretty much goes amongst the people, and everybody decides, hey, we got to get rid of Ahab, and causes everyone to, turn against each other. And in our kind of Pentecostal background, culty kind of background, they were just immediately assumed that whoever that was, for some reason they just say, oh, that was a demon, and I'm like, no, not even close,
Nope.
Demons is something
Yeah.
else, and they said that because it was a lying spirit, and people
Yep.
have a problem with like God deciding to use that specifically to judge someone or a nation, and I'm like, well, that is a can of worms, but we're not going to talk about that one, because we could talk about that one for a while.
Yeah.
So, but anyways, that being said, establishing who these beings are, and that some of them decided to fall, and I believe according to the book of Enoch, there were 22, right, that decided that they were gonna
200.
200.
Yeah, the initial group was 200.
200. There you go. 200. And then, where'd I get this 22 from? There's a 22 somewhere connection. I don't know where it's from.
Sure.
So that being said, in the book of Enoch, we have these 200 fallen ones that decide to rebel against their order and leave, their habitation, the spiritual world, right? In which they dwelt against, and they came down, and that kind of is where your episode 3 ties in a little bit, and it ties into the Apkallu and other, things. You want to kind of expand on that a little bit?
Yeah, so the Apkallu were the Mesopotamian deities who came down and they brought knowledge. Some of them are depicted as a bird head and wings. Others are depicted as like a man with wings, and others are depicted with this weird kind of like fish hat on. And you also see them with like this watch and a little baggie in their hand. And I've heard that that's like the seeds of life. I'm not sure. I haven't looked into that deep enough yet. But
Yeah. You see that a lot. You see a lot of people who believe in the Anunnaki kind of stuff,
Yeah.
who say we're just basically, created by them to be slaves to the ruling class, you see that a lot, that they have that little baggie with the seeds of life or something like that. Yeah.
And I have no doubt part of that Anunnaki story might be true, because of course these beings would want to enslave us. That's what they've been doing since,
Makes
the
sense.
evil ones, since the beginning.
Correct.
Now, it's just these Apkallu, there's new research that's come out with them in the last couple of years by this guy named Amar Anus, and basically the short version of it is they relate exactly to these watcher beings. There's multiple connections, and they basically, you can tell that these are the same beings. Now, they decided, or in the Mesopotamian culture, they were known as the Apkallu. They were seen that way. I don't know if they talked about themselves as that way or introduced themselves as that way, but basically that's what they were known as. And you start to get this picture of these beings coming down. They descended on what's believed to be Mount Hermon, and they made an oath. So the leader of them he said, hey, let's make a pact, because I fear that some of you are going to back out of this and I'm going to be left alone with the punishment. So this shows that they knew they were doing wrong. So they came down, and if you think about it, women were made for humanity. In heaven, you don't have any need for biological recreation. God creates the people up there. He doesn't need any recreation up there. So you picture these older brothers as the watchers. That's how I see them. These older brothers, and then they like the prodigal son story. They're the older brother who's been there longer, who's been faithful, and then this prodigal goes off on his own, in his own sin, and then he's welcomed back by God with open arms. And the older brother's like, wait a minute, what's going on here? Why did he get the fatted calf?
Right.
So then it's like, so you see these older brothers of ours getting kind of jealous with us, and then they see women and they're just like what is this? Like, what is this creation? This is for them? Like these lowborn.
Sorry, that's funny. It's funny in my head. It's funny because it's like our women are so good looking. Like even the angels are like, what is that thing?
And there's multiple verses that say that, and even Paul, when he talks about the head covering, he's like, cover your head for the angels are watching. It's like,
yeah.
And that's the thing. And it's like, so they come down for women and they trade knowledge. And so they teach, metalworking, all the things they taught metalworking, the deciphering of omens and curses and all these different plants and roots and what they do. All the stuff they taught led to destruction and not like the betterment of mankind. It led to the inspiration of lust and warfare. So that's what they brought down. And then what's funny is in the book of Enoch, in First Enoch, there's a part where God's speaking. He says the stuff they taught were the throwaway secrets of heaven. This wasn't even the good stuff.
Dang, yeah, that blew my mind, because like you said, like, then what else don't we know? You know what I mean? Like,
exactly. Like, what else?
Woo.
And then the thing is too, here's another tangent. When they came down and they became fallen, not by descending, because they've already been down here and stuff like that, but by making this pact. They now, by defiling themselves with sexual intercourse, something that was not meant for them, they corrupted their flesh.
Right.
And then they became fallen. So now, with this corrupted flesh, they lose some of their access to the heavenlies. They now leave their abode, their first body, their first home. They leave that, and they're corrupted. So now, we don't have the same access. I guess we're on earth. I guess we're going to set ourselves up as the Greek gods. I guess we're going to be the Apkallu.
Right.
And then you think of that, and then you think of like, okay, so they're limited now. How are they going to get around the same way? Or how are their offspring going to get around the same way? And then you see all this UFO stuff, all this technology that's used. So keep in mind, these are super intelligent beings beyond anybody in any human capacity of like for this knowledge. So they can build all these crafts. They can build all these stuff from the knowledge of physics from heaven. So that kind of ties in, but there's this whole thread of the Watchers that goes throughout the whole Bible, and that's why when people are like, Genesis 6, why does it matter? Why does the Watchers in Enoch 1 coming down matter? And it's like, man, this goes through the entire Bible, and when Jesus came, he did a lot concerning the Watchers.
Right. And before we get into your next portion of it, I just want to throw it, because you brought it up, and I want to bring it in there, because to sum it all up, if you do your research, you might not want to, but I'm gonna just tell you right now. Basically, the ancient gods of old, like we said earlier, are definitely real. Okay, think of all the Mesopotamian, the Greeks. That's right, Zeus, his council. That's right, and even the stories of them having sex with women and creating hybrids. Hybrid, or what as like Nephilim, or what are the Greek ones called again? What are the Greek?
In Greeks, there would be demigods.
Demigods. There you go. It was slipping my mind. So like the whole Percy Jackson, all that stuff. I mean, these are stories. Yeah, they're fictional, but there is a truth to them. Like definitely they were glamorized and fantasized to even glorify them, to make them sound like that's really cool. You know what I mean? Like today, even our modern day heroes, like avengers, our saviors, right? They're all based. A lot of them are based on these ancient heroes of old that that everybody worshipped. Because back in the day, you worshiped not just the god in charge, the lowercase g god, but also its offspring were worshipped. And so we have a lot of that even in our Marvel superheroes, DC superheroes. I mean, I'm a huge fan of Superman, and but if you look into the background, the history of how they came up with Superman's name and the colors that he uses, everything has to do with Canaanites, the ancient Canaanite El, and so that's why his name is Kal-El and his dad's name is Jor-El, and he's of the house of El, and to them that just means like chosen one of God or vessel of God and different things like that. And so there's all these connections to ancient Hebrew beliefs, and I'm not saying specifically biblical, but or Judeo Christian, but more like their Canaanite religions and different things like that. So there's all these connections that we don't know or miss. Have you seen the movie Watchmen, or have you heard of it? Read the comic books, Drew?
No, I never saw Watchmen. I'm familiar with it, but I never watched it.
So there's like a character, his name in there. His name is Moloch. You know what I mean? And he was
wow,
yeah, and he's like a hero, and he was the father of Night Owl. You know what I mean? Or the predecessor of or someone who's before Night Owl, and the whole look of him is like an owl. If you know anything about Moloch and owl and all that connection, it's like, dude, it's all over the place, and if you don't know, people, Moloch is an ancient deity who required child sacrifice and all kinds of different things like that, and we see that in our movies and everything that we watch, and we think, oh, this is a really cool story, this is new. But it is no coincidence that what comes out of Hollywood is just a big, hail to all the ancient gods, because we're in the middle of this turf war, of these gods against our God, and that's kind of the what the next episode that you talked about is episode 4. There's just kind of like this mission, this forgotten mission that we don't really think about too much. We know we're supposed to spread the gospel. We know we have to talk to other people about Jesus, but what about him? What besides salvation? Like, there's a bigger picture here than just like hey, we're saved, yeah, but exactly what is being reconstituted, what is being reconciled in the process of us bringing people into the kingdom of God. And I don't think people realize what that is. So let's talk about your episode 4. Episode 4, you go a little bit into the secret mission of Jesus on earth, and I like how that's set up, because it's very like, ooh, what is that, and it's nothing it's nothing new, it's actually very old, and it's all over the Bible. And so let's talk about that, Drew.
Yeah, so many of the things Jesus did while on the earth directly related back to these watchers. So when he was talking to Peter, for instance, and he said, the gates of hell will not prevail against thee, he was in Caesarea Philippi, which is believed to be at right around Mount Hermon. Mm-hmm. And at the base of Mount Hermon, there was a place called the Grotto of Banias, which was for the Greek god Pan, and it was basically the geographical location which was thought to be the gateway to hell. So then you see Jesus talking to Peter and said, the gates of hell will not prevail against my church, basically, and he is right in front of the gates of hell, the geographical location of the gates of hell.
Yep.
And right next to the mountain where these watchers first descended. So he was right there. And then there's also research that leads to believe that the Mount of Transfiguration was on that same mountain. Mm-hmm. So then he goes there, and he's basically this beacon of light signaling to the watchers, hey, this is where you came down. This is where I'm taking back the nations.
Yeah, every time I read that, dude, it gives me a little bit of chills, because I imagine him going.
I got the chills right now too.
Yeah, dude, I imagine him going like Super Saiyan mode, like, bah! And it just turns into like full form Jesus. You know what I mean? Yeah. And you're like, what? And the demons are like, his power level is 9,000. You know what I mean? And just getting blown away, because they're like, whoa, what's going on?
Oh, dude, go ahead.
No, go ahead. Go
okay,
right
so
ahead.
Here's a side note I heard the other day, and keep in mind, I have to research this more and have to look into this, but it was just I saw it and I was like, this is too much for my mind right now. I have to put this in the back burner because it's going to blow my mind. But somebody was suggesting that since Moses was there, and I'm drawing a blank. Who's the other guy there? It's on the tip of my tongue.
Where?
On the Mount of Transfiguration.
Ooh, I don't
It was it Elijah?
Oh yes, sorry. The prophet Elijah and Moses.
So when they were up there, this person was suggesting that Jesus was, since God is outside of time, it was Moses at a different time being on the mountain, Mount Sinai, and it was Elijah on Mount Carmel meeting up there, and they all met up in
the same timeline.
Yeah, I don't know. Hey, that's just something for us to look into,
bro. That'd be so crazy. Oh my gosh. And that's what they were seeing. Like it was like the universes meet. You know what I mean? And
that's crazy. Dude. But yeah, I want to look into that.
Oh, bro.
But back to that. So he climbs.
Drew, no, we gotta end.
I know I rocked your world.
We gotta end the show right now.
We gotta go, dude. We gotta go.
Let's take
First,
a break.
we have to nap, and then we have to start researching.
All right. Carry on.
Okay, so he went up to Mount Hermon. He transfigured himself. He let everyone know. He let the people there with him, and he let the Watchers, the unseen realm, know that he was the divine Son of God by transfiguring himself. Peter starts flipping out, and he's like, "We need to build tents here. We need to build a tent for you, for Moses, Elijah. We need to build. This is a holy place." And then he transforms back, and then he's just like, I'm assuming, just calm, takes Peter back down the mountain and carries on with his day. And then you see,
I can just imagine Peter like, "Are we not going to discuss this, or you're just going to show this to us, and then we're going to go eat some fish? That's it."
Yeah,
you know,
like, why is my face shining?
Yeah, man, that's crazy.
But yeah, it's and then like you see when Jesus talks to the legion of demons, so they call him a specific name. So when he was in the Jewish territory, they called him a name that the Jews knew, and when he was, I forget the other place he was in, but they called him the Son of the Most High. Now, the other place where you see the Son of the Most High is in Deuteronomy 32, when he divided up the nations and put his sons in charge over them. So, okay, so when the demons say, like, basically, we know who you are, the Son of the Most High, why would they know that? Just from rumors, from hearing stuff? So the demons, let's backtrack. The demons are the disembodied spirits of the Nephilim, which were the giants. So because they were created of the earth and made on earth, they are forced to stay here. They don't get taken, into the other realm with God because they're not from there.
Pay attention, folks. If you haven't listened to other episodes that we have, we're going to tell you where demons come from is what we're doing right now, because a lot of people have the understanding that fallen angels and demons are the same thing, and that's not a biblical thing, It's a little bit more technical than that. And we get a lot of details from the first few books of the Book of Enoch, the first few chapters, and this is what's going on right now. So go ahead.
Exactly. So in First Enoch, it says it plain as day. These spirits were made of the earth. They're going to be left on the earth to dwell. They're going to be able to torment man and do all that stuff until the time the day of the Lord comes. Mm-hmm. Now, when you look at the biblical, I forget which episode. I think it was the Book of Giants episode I did. But there's a biblical way to get to that fact, and it's through the Rephaim. So the rulers of the dead, this mysterious group, this offshoot of the Nephilim, they were worshipped. Their spirits were worshipped by the people at the time. But so if the demons are the disembodied spirits of the giants, you go back in time. The giants were there, and this will tie into another episode that I did later, the Angel of the Lord one. But so when Joshua and them were fighting the giants, this angel pops up named the Angel of the Lord, and he, right before they fight at Jericho, and he meets with Joshua, and then Joshua goes on this campaign of just wiping out the giants. Now those giants saw the Angel of the Lord with Joshua and several other times throughout the Old Testament helping Israel at all these crucial points throughout history. So then flash forward to Jesus. The Angel of the Lord, I explained, is the pre-incarnate Jesus.
Right.
So then when these demons see him, when Legion sees Jesus, they're like, oh man, this is the guy that destroyed us. He's the reason why we're spirits now.
Right.
He helped him and he helped the Israelites, the Hebrews. He helped them destroy us. So they know who this guy is. They know him well. And now through research, you find these things. You find these gems, and you figure out why they called him Son of the Most High. And it relates back to the Watchers and to their offspring.
Right.
and they loved their sons. And it says in First Enoch, and you take every extra biblical text with a grain of salt, of course, but and you compare it to the Bible. So their punishment was to watch their sons die. Now, if you didn't love your son, it wouldn't matter. If they were just pure evil and had no capacity for any amount of love, then it wouldn't make sense. But they had to watch their sons die. They had to watch their sons devour each other, destroy each other. I think even earthquakes ate up a group of them and stuff like that. But
Right.
it's this thread goes throughout the whole Bible.
Right.
And
Yeah.
then in the end, they come back.
Yeah, indeed. And so that is something that we see and we might miss in the Bible because we don't know, again, that context. Like, who are these, all these tribes in Joshua, And that's another point that I like to bring up a lot because it's a good, in my opinion, apologetic tool as well. Because sometimes when you read Joshua, it seems a bit harsh. You're like, well, God just told them to wipe out everyone, women, children. And like, why would God do that? He's a genocidal maniac. He's a megamaniacal, blah 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 blah. They just go on this whole thing. The Richard Dawkins thing that he says, where he just goes off on this whole tangent on who the Hebrew God is. But when you understand the story of who are those tribes, it's all these like hybrid Nephilim tribes. Like all these people that aren't supposed to be alive. That's why they're giants. That's why when they sent out the spies, they were like, dude, we can't even carry their fruit. Like, it's huge fruit. Like, it's just these huge people on these lands, and these were like these Nephilim tribes, and that God helped, of course, cleanse that land using Joshua. But when we read it any other way, if we read it just kind of like the modern day traditional, there's definitely apologetic people that have that view, the traditional view, where it's just those are regular people, and they usually say the judgment was given to them because they were a sinful nation. But there isn't really a lot of information on them other than that they were giants, and so it's a little difficult for me to like just say, okay, they were sinners, so let's destroy everybody, including children. Like, I don't know, it's a little rough for me, that explanation. So
Yeah.
when you understand this other explanation, it's like, oh, okay, well, those aren't humans. Those are these just evil tribes that they're evil because they came from the descendants of fallen watchers, or these entities that created, pretty much these demigods or Nephilim that weren't supposed to exist,
Yeah, and there was other stuff going on too. So it's there were humans there too, but they were mixed with them, and they were completely. That's why God always says, don't learn the ways of the people around you.
Right.
So now there were people living with those Nephilim, and they knew the ways of the people around them, and they were fully entrenched in it. So they were doing child sacrifice. They were doing there was something called foundation sacrifice, where they would sacrifice a child and put it in the foundation of a building when it was being built.
Right.
They would do all these disgusting things. They would just, there's so many things they did. It wasn't just, oh, these were bad people, or oh, these people, some of these humans had to die because they were just living with the giants. It's like, no, this was a whole culture. And I think the span of when the Nephilim reigned was over 1,000 years. I want to say 1,200 to 1,300. So people don't realize that too. Like look how long we've had, just even cars. And look how different things are from the time we had cars till now. Nowhere near the time span that these things ruled.
Mm-hmm.
So they had to be wiped out. Their bloodlines had to be wiped out, and their culture, their evil, had to be wiped out. Now the thing is too, it comes down to this as well. So once you know that, then you realize this: who is able to tell Yahweh what to do with His creation? He created humanity from dust, His breath of life. He created it Himself. Who can tell Him, hey, you can't do that with this? It's His creation.
I'm glad you say that, dude, because honestly, I said this to a couple of my fellow believers, and they got a little bit like scandalized. You know what I mean? If that's the word.
You scandalized them.
Yeah, because I told them, like, look, because they said something where like God wouldn't do this, and I'm like, I wouldn't say wouldn't or won't or can't in the same sentence of the God of the Bible. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
Because I believe in God to the point where it's like, okay, you do you, man. Like you're the creator of all. What do I have to say? That's going to change the mind of the creator of all, who knows all knowing, sovereign God, and I believe that. And I wholeheartedly believe. So, like, even let's go back to the Joshua story. Like, even if that were the case, I'm like, all right, well, this is the God I believe in. You know what I mean? Like, I mean, I'm to that point where it's like, I believe in you, and I believe that whatever it is that you do is going to be a better outcome for us and for society. And people might think that, oh, that's just a really blind way of believing in God. I'm like, no. Based on all the research that I can do about God, this is a very, very well-researched decision, because especially when it comes to my faith, I do not like to make decisions or like final, closed-handed decisions without doing an egregious amount of research. You know what I mean? And even then, like, I'm okay with, like, I say closed-handed, but actually most of my decisions, I've made them, but I have them with an open hand, sort of. You know what I mean? Things can change because I'm constantly learning something new. And I could say this now, and then episode 80, I'm like, oh, back in episode 42, I said something, I don't know, because I'm constantly researching and growing in my understanding of God. But right now, I'm at that comfort level with, Yahweh, the God of the Bible. I'm like, you know what? You do you, and I follow you. You know what I mean? That's what it is, And,
and that's great. That's a great spot to be in.
Yeah, I think so. I really do. So touching on that, because, Jesus has, so that secret mission is that, he went over there, he's declaring war against evil at the gates of hell, which, by the way, interesting, a few years back, I don't know if you got a notice on your phone about the gates of hell being reopened.
No.
It's really weird.
I think I heard about that.
Yeah, and I don't know why or how I stumbled upon it. It was a complete accident, and it said, the gates of hell, and it actually took me to a link to over there, like Mount Hermon, like what we know as Mount Hermon today. And I'm like, what is going on? Who in Apple, because I have an iPhone, who in Apple is like worshiping some deity from there? You know what I mean? And I know they are. If you know the Carl Teichert stuff, I mean, the research of the game of gods and all those stuff, and what happens at Burning Man, and what happens in all these events where all these high, intellectuals go and have these like spiritual experiences and come back with all these new innovative ideas to grow technology, which is really just an ancient tale.
That's the Watcher story right there.
That's the Watcher story, exactly. And so when we hear today, it's funny because the whole ancient alien stuff and the whole Anunnaki stuff is growing so much about how these entities, these watchers or these different creatures came, gave us technology, gave us wisdom, and all this different things. Like, oh, that's really interesting, that's really cool. I think that's what happened, but we don't even realize that that's what's going on today. It's still going on. You know what I mean? And a lot of these CEOs and all that stuff, that's what they're tapped into. That's what they believe, And I don't think a lot of them believe that they're worshiping some kind of evil entity. I think they just chosen to believe in this type of spirituality, and they're just, by default, growing this this world in an evil way, because they think it's good for society, and it's always painted that way, right? Even in the old times, it's always painted like, oh, well, what we're doing for you is it's going to be great for you guys, biggest lie ever. You guys will be like gods, and we hear scientists say that all the time today. Like, well, in the future we're going to be like gods, we're going to be this, we're going to be that. But anyways, there's a lot of stories in the Bible that actually hint at and show you, not hint, but actually very specifically show you that there is an actual battle against these Nephilim creatures and against these what you would understand as demigods and the gods of old. There is this actual battle going on. And one of my favorite ones that I read, and I didn't understand at first, was the Hercules story. And I know some of you are saying, like, what? You mean the Hercules? Kevin Sorbo Hercules? Yes. Freaking Hercules in the Bible. And when I read it, and I remember I told one of my pastors, like, look, it's freaking Hercules in here. And he's like, no, it's not Hercules, what you think. And I'm like, okay. And he totally squashed my bubble, you know what I mean? But it's okay. So your episode on Mount Carmel and Hercules,
Yeah.
the Nephilim. What's going on there, bro?
So at the time, the deity who Jezebel she brought over and who she worshipped was a deity named Melkart. So, and then this talks about their Elijah. The Mount Carmel story is Elisha goes up to Mount Carmel. He has a showdown between the prophets of Baal, I think 450 prophets of Baal, and then Yahweh. And it's cool because what he does is he pours water over his altar over and over because they're supposed to call down fire. So meanwhile, during a drought, Elijah's pouring water all over his altar. One bucket for every tribe of Israel. Interestingly, it could be said because it was 12. And so he's doing that, and he's like mocking them almost. He's calling them out. He's like, "Oh, why don't you go and cut yourself more? Maybe your God's using the restroom. Maybe he's not here because he's doing that."
It's one of my favorite stories.
It's an awesome one, and because he was considered one of the dying and rising gods,
right?
This Baal at the time character. So Baal means, its actual meaning is like husband or master or owner, but then when it's applied to a deity, it means Lord or like owner or ruler of all. So it's a generic term. So I think there is a deity that actually is Baal. I think there's that too. And with these fallen Elohim, there's so many like mix and matchings that they do and like stolen identities and stuff like that to where it's hard to kind of pin them down. Plus they're interdimensional beings. So there's a whole nother aspect of confusion that goes into trying to figure out who's who. Mm-hmm. But so back to her worshiping Melkart, if you look at Baal as Baal is another term for Lord, and you look at who they worshipped in that city at the time, Melkart is the Phoenician name for Hercules. Yeah, so that's the deity that she, and the story revolves around Ahab and Jezebel, and she was basically corrupting Ahab. So her god was Melkart, and that's the Phoenician name for Hercules. So this links Hercules to the Baal of Mount Carmel, and if this is true.
Quick thing, sorry. Is your like microphone, is it hitting on something or I'm not sure because I keep hearing a click, 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 click.
Did you hear it now?
When you start, I don't know, talking or moving, I hear it's like a pop, pop, pop. I don't know what it is.
Okay, yeah, I don't know. I think I had something in my hand. Maybe I was clicking it without realizing.
Okay, cool. Here we go. Nope, it's clicking again. As soon as
really?
I don't know, what is that click? It's like click, click, click.
Yeah, I don't know.
Oh.
I mean, I could hold the microphone up. Let me see. How does that?
Let me see.
Anything?
No.
Hello.
No clicking right now.
Okay, I'll just hold it up. Maybe something was hitting my desk or something. I don't know.
Yeah. Okay, let's continue. No worries. It's not that bothersome. No big deal. Sorry.
So Melkart was the Phoenician name for Hercules.
Right there. That's where we were. Yeah. So okay. Yeah. Okay. I knew about the story, and then when like that connection came along, I was like, oh snap! Like again, it's those things where you're like, is it in there? Like, what's in there exactly? And that's one thing. I think I'm glad you bring that up. We don't realize that a lot of the Hebrew names of these ancient gods are like the same gods of other gods that didn't have that name, specifically. Like we have a lot of connections to like I believe what's that the seducer one, the one name
Succubus?
Ashtaroth? Yeah, Ashtaroth, yeah. And which is an interesting character when you play that fighting game. What's that fighting game called? Do you ever play that fighting game?
No, is someone named Ashtaroth in it?
There's literally someone named Ashtaroth, and it's like it's like a monster creature, and it has one eye. That's it.
Jeez.
And, yeah. So if you know any history, it's like what's what I'm saying. Like their culture, the ancient gods' culture, is like seeped into our society, like so deep.
Oh yeah.
It is so deep. You have no idea, and I think, in my opinion, that's why a lot of fellow believers struggle so much. And that's another point that I want to bring up. Why do a lot of believers kind of struggle especially the younger crowd these days? Why do they struggle so much with this kind of stuff? Like why are they depressed? all the time, or why do they have so much anxiety, or why do they have, because you're in the middle of a spiritual war and you're getting bombarded and you have no idea. You know what I mean? You have no idea that you're literally getting bombarded. You're getting shot at. You're getting stabbed. You're getting, like, all these things are going on in the spiritual realm, and it's just this weight on top of you, and you have no idea where it's coming from, and it's like everywhere. It's in everything we consume. It's in the symbols of our food. Like, I mean, it's literally in pretty much everything. In order to avoid it, you have to be Amish. You know what I mean? Like, you have to be Amish and just do your own thing. But otherwise, your shoes, your Starbucks cup, your phone, the technology you're using, it's like, oh my gosh, and there's this war going on, and it's this war that we're talking about right now, this war of that, we read these wars in the Bible and we think wars are just like that, it's just, fighting with a sword and fighting with a shield, and we kind of have this thing like, oh, those wars are behind us, and it's like, no. While that was happening, there was physical wars, there was also a spiritual war mirroring that war, because we know that what happens in the spiritual world, like these spiritual wars, reflect on this earthly realm. That definitely is a thing, and we tend to forget that. So how does warfare look like today? And your average conspiracy theorist will tell you, oh, we're in this system, and we're completely locked in, and these globalists are taking control of us, and they would be right in a lot of those aspects. But what is driving that? What's the spiritual force behind that, and what does that look like pragmatically? Like, what does that look like on a day-to-day basis? I think is the thing that we miss, and because of that, I see a lot of people, a lot of believers, just fellow Christians, just struggling so much because they overconsume everything around them and not consume enough of this, the Bible, and what it's really trying to tell us. And it's very freeing, it's very freeing once you know. But when you don't know, you're just basically fighting a war that you're not meant to fight by yourself. You know what I mean?
Yeah, and I'll say this about conspiracy theories, because especially in this line of research that we're in, and this kind of lane that we're in, a lot of us have researched conspiracy theories. A lot of us have done all that, and honestly, that can get super depressing because it is a losing battle until the very last hour.
Yeah.
So it's just important to know that, hey, things are, you can try to stop as much of it as you can, so more people can be saved, and do your part, because we're supposed to undo the unfruitful works of darkness. We're supposed to expose the enemy. But it's important to remember, don't get so deep into the fear and paranoia of it. You can still research it all you want, but don't get so deep into that. You have to realize that you are a Christian, so you need to be doing, God's work for you. So you need to be also reading your Bible, learning about that, spreading God's word in tandem with that. So I'm not saying don't do that research at all, but what I'm saying is just realize, yes, it seems like the cards are stacked against you, but you are not to live in fear. Mm-hmm. You're gonna be fine, because you have work God has cut out for you. You do that until your time comes when He calls you back. And if He calls you back via martyrdom or something crazy, guess what? Once you're done, you're done.
Mm-hmm, mm-hmm.
Once you're dead, you're dead. So
indeed, and I'm glad you bring that up, because it definitely was a side effect of mine for a while, where I just kind of became bitter.
Yeah.
I'm like, you don't even know, bro. You're stuck in the system. You don't even know, bro. It gives you like this other level of like self-righteousness. Like, if you only knew, dude. But God kind of frees you from that, especially if you let yourself. Unfortunately, like, a lot of people just kind of get stuck in that. Me and Omar have this reference, I think we said it in an episode or two, where you can't have dinner with the Mad Hatter for too long. You just can't do that. You can't stay down there. That's so true. You can't do that.
That's a really good way to say it.
And that's kind of the whole purpose of the story. It's like, the Mad Hatter has a purpose in the story, but dude, you can't stay there. Like, you cannot just have tea and just chill with the Mad Hatter, because that's gonna destroy your mind, and you become the Mad Hatter, and you don't want to do that, so yeah. But let's continue with that Carmel Hercules story. So the reason you connected that is because it exposes this Hercules character, because we see Hercules like, ooh, we see these cartoons. Hercules is a hero. We see because of when I grew up, I see Kevin Sorbo and he's now a believer, and you're like, oh, Hercules, Hercules, and everything kind of has this positive vibe, and that's what we were talking about earlier. There's always this twist to these gods of old that makes them seem like amazing. It makes them seem like, oh, that's really cool, but what was going on during that time with that Phoenician god, that which we understand now is Hercules, that makes Hercules such an evil character?
Well, what makes him such an evil character, you could just look at from what the Greeks say about him. Just, you don't have to look at all the different facts about him and see if they're true. But if you just look at his origin, he is a human woman and a Zeus, a divine being. Mm-hmm. So that right there is directly from Genesis 6. They came down, they took wives from the daughters of Cain, from the daughters of Seth. Daughters of Seth, right? Am I getting it right? Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. Okay, yeah. So they took human wives. Mm-hmm. Now, he is by definition a Nephilim. And then you look at, what was he famous for? His great strength and endurance. Mm-hmm. So he did his impossible labors, his 10 or 12 labors. Where he did all these crazy things. He defeated all these beasts. So, and I think there's a myth where he defeated Cerberus. But he had immense strength. And then you look at the Nephilim; they had immense strength. Now, this mythologized version of him, I don't know if that's a word, but whatever version
mythologized?
Of him. Mythologized. There we go. So this mythologized version of him is propaganda. It's like, oh, he's great, he did this, and he probably would have ruled at the time. And then I think I forget where, but they found the tomb of Hercules. They said, ooh. I saw a couple articles that said tomb of Hercules found.
Oh, okay.
So this all leads us to believe this was an actual being that was here on this earth. He was a demigod in Greek mythology, which would make him a Nephilim in Hebrew thought and in the real world. So it's just that this is who the cartoon's about. This is who the movie with The Rock is about. and in the Battle of Armageddon,
he does a Hercules movie.
Oh yeah, and yeah, it's a high. I don't know. I liked it before I realized all this stuff. Now I look at it in a research light, but
right. And I mean, that's one of the things that I got over. I had to in order to make movies great again, as I like to say, because it was just hard to watch anything. I was like, dude, this is propaganda. Yeah. You know what I mean? But
and I think there's definite things we shouldn't watch now where we're at.
Yeah.
But I think there also is like, I watch movies for research. I rented the other day Immortals. It was a low budget movie about Greek gods and all that, but I used something from that movie,
dude,
for research.
With Henry Cavill.
Yeah,
that's a good movie. I like it.
And that bull in that movie,
yeah, I know,
is actually what I used for the Throne of Satan stuff, for the altar on top of
I know.
The Temple of Zeus.
When I heard your episode, I was like, dude, that's in the movie Immortals.
Yeah, and they put it there. That all this stuff you don't know it's actually real.
Yeah, it really happened. It's craziness, man. All right, man. Let's move forward. We're almost done. I mean, we have a lot of other episodes that you can talk about. I mean, not you can talk about, but I want people to go listen to your show. You know what I mean? But there's a few of them that I kind of want to cover. And are you good on time? I'm sorry.
Yeah. Have you seen the YouTube channel?
Yes.
Okay. Because you said podcast earlier. I don't know if you actually saw the YouTube or not.
Yeah,
I think that's what
I'm talking about. I think that's what I saw first.
Okay, cool,
yeah.
Cool.
And I was like, oh, look at this guy with his hair.
Look at this hair guy.
Yeah. That's what I told my friend. I'm like, hey, the guy with the hair. I'm like, oh, the radical Christian. Yeah, the radical Christian. Yeah. Okay. Here we go. Let's see. Okay. So let's touch a little bit on this because another thing that's happening nowadays that we also think is new is the hybrids of animals and humans. And if you don't know, there's a lot of stuff going on in the scientist realm where they're trying to do exactly that, get specific traits. Think of the Hulk. The Hulk has all these different things that he's able to do because he has a little bit of this animal, a little bit of that creature, some starfish in him, some this, some that. He legit does. And then
the strength of 5,000 starfish.
That would be such a weird thing to say. and all these different things that create this superhuman thing, and they've also done it opposite, where they're injecting human DNA into animals, and animals are growing human parts, and pigs are growing like human ears and different things like that. Like a lot of weird stuff going on in the science realm, and we see that today, and we're like, well, that's modern day science for you. That's what's going on, and as we if you've listened to the show, you know that a lot of stuff, nothing new is under the sun, right? That's kind of like the classic phrase we say here in this kind of research, because we think all these things are new, but they're not, And there is actually biblical accounts of giants and the animal-human hybrids. And want to talk about that a little bit, Drew?
Yes. So exactly, nothing new under the sun. All this stuff, all these superhero movies, all these demigod stuff, all this is leading the general population to want this superhuman strength, want transhumanism, want this power beyond human capability. Mm-hmm. So where do animal-human hybrids originate? Well, the Book of Giants, another extra biblical text that was found with the Dead Sea Scrolls in the cave of Qumran. It was found with multiple copies of the Bible, every book except for Esther, which I don't know why it's not Esther. I mean, that's something to look up eventually. But so in the Book of Giants, it is the flood account from a giant's perspective. So this giant was having terrifying dreams of the upcoming doom. But in that book, it talks about the Watchers, the 200 Watchers, each taking 200 types of animals. That's one for each of them. And they or one of each animal for each of them. So, something to that effect. So basically it says they created these things called monsters, and the Book of Giants refers to them as monsters. So these were animal-angel hybrids. And then you look throughout mythology, and what do you see? You see minotaurs, you see centaurs, you see fawns, you see Pan as a goat man. Mm-hmm. And then you look at the Bible, it talks about satyrs, talks about goat demons that the Israelites worshipped. So, this in the Book of Giants, when they came down in Genesis 6, they corrupted everything. That's why the flood came, because they corrupted. It wasn't just like, the 200 people have human wives. This sucks. They taught some bad things. It wasn't as minor as that. It was over 1,000 years of just corruption, and these Nephilim ruled over humanity because they were bigger and stronger. Simple as that. Right. And so they made these things that they called monsters, and there's in the Book of Giants, it shows them. They were talking to the monsters. The giants were talking to the monsters. So it shows that they were able to communicate and understand. Mm-hmm. And that text is so fragmented, we only have pieces of it. Mm-hmm. But then you look today, and it's like, I think China just got cleared to do a monkey-human hybrid. And anything they put in the news is so like old hat. It's so already done, and they put it out, and it's like it's slowly easing people in to stuff they've already done. They already, I guarantee you, they already have animal-human hybrids that are fully sentient and fully strong and super soldier-esque. Yeah. And then I believe they have ones that are grotesque, like sad creations as well.
Yeah, man. I think the recent movie that came out, I forgot what it's called, but it was like a World War II movie, and it's I forgot what it's called. It's kind of low budget, but they basically, I mean, you think about all the movies, folks. Right now, I want you to sit down and think about all of these movies that have talked about superhumans in some way. Like, think of your good old Captain America. You know what I mean? Like, what in the world did they inject into him, to make him what he is, Because he's a human. He's a human. But what did they put in him, And then we have all these stories, if what's a good one for people that really kind of exposes what military, kind of these sub-military things going on, experiments on humans, is like Hellboy, for example.
Oh, dude, yeah.
Hellboy's a huge one, both 1 and 2 of the older ones. The new one I didn't see, but I assume it's the same situation. But you have over there, you have the Germans were renowned to get into, if you don't know, they were into the occult, trying to, contact entities from the other side, open portals. They're kind of doing all this stuff way back when, back in the early 1900s, right?
And this is true.
Yes.
Yeah.
and and it's definitely true. This is not just the movies. This is like what is reported that they were trying to do. You know what I mean?
Yep.
And so, then you have in the movie Hellboy, they were successful. They opened a portal, and then they basically have this demon, half demon creature, or no, he's a full demon creature, come through. But they turned him good. He's a good guy. He's a good guy, and he's fighting for us. And so, but throughout that, you see a lot of this, like these, even in that first Hellboy story, there's this ancient story of this creator being. He creates the eternal class gets jealous, like, dude, everything is just in there. All what we're talking about right now is in that movie, and but they're creating all these like hybrids. They have all these different things going on, and I mean, I can name so many other movies, but a lot of this is going on. And it's true, like it's a real thing. It's fantasized for movies, obviously, but it's like a real thing. You know what I saw just yesterday, and I was blown away because again, I was like, oh yeah, now that I know this information, I want to go back and revisit some movies. Right? I saw the Imaginarium of Dr. Parnassus. Have you seen that?
No, but I know what it is.
Okay,
So the one that Heath Ledger died while he's filming.
While he was filming, correct. So if you hadn't seen this movie, folks, it's a really weird movie, but there's a lot of deep stuff going on, and it's basically promoting kind of like that Eastern mysticism stuff, But in the movie starts like kind of Heath Ledger's. Especially if you're a conspiracy theorist, they're like, yeah, talk about this, but right before he dies, in this movie, he actually dies a couple of times, or he was supposed to, but he was hung by his neck, and then he had a little all-seeing eye Illuminati triangle in the front of his forehead, and two other symbols on the left and right, and they were put there on him, burned on him, or something like that. And he was hung there, but then he survived the hanging. And throughout the movie, the whole movie is just filled with symbolism all over the place, right? And if you know about like contacting the spiritual realm, especially in the Masonic stuff, they like to do that like on a checkered board floor. You know what I mean? And that's like the black and white. That's kind of like the mirror gateway to the spirit world, and which is interesting because you see that in a lot of musical performances and movies and things like that, like The Matrix, like you see that all over the place. And so in that movie, then he goes into the spiritual realm and he's fighting or his imagination, and he's fighting like when you go into your imagination, you fight all these temptation, like these lower forms of yourself, and there's these different versions of yourself within you, and the whole movie is kind of promoting this idea, right? And but my whole point is like we see these things, right, and we kind of think like, whatever, it's just another movie, it's just a weird movie, whatever. But looking at the symbols, like, dude, so ancient, so ancient, and it goes back to everything that we're talking about right now. Like it connects. Thousands of years of ancient history are connecting with what you're watching right before you today, and I can't stress that enough. I gotta stop deviating Drew to keep saying this over and over again. You know what I mean?
No, it's important to reiterate. I mean, even the Bible, God repeats himself multiple times to get the point across.
Mm-hmm. And
so it's important.
But going back, I kind of like rabbit trail as I like to do sometimes. But we were talking about the human animal hybrids, and I think one of the stories I tell some people is like, for example, in the Noah story, God specifically asked for two pure, like for a pair of pure animals,
Yes.
So during that time of Noah's story, we know that there were other animals there that were not pure. You know what I mean?
Yep.
And these are the ones we're talking about right here, like these hybrids, these like centaurs and all these different things. There's even like some theories that maybe dinosaurs were part of that, but I don't know. I never looked into that, Yeah, I never really fully like researched that, but these like Tyrannosaurus Rex, all these creatures that were like just crazy.
And if you look at those, they're reptilian, which fits the bill for seraphim.
Right, and that's something that I forgot to kind of mention earlier when you were saying today. That's where, first of all, there's a reptilian like alien creatures, right?
Yeah.
And then the reptilians around the world, like all these ancient societies have a god that they worship, and it was like reptile in origin, some sort of reptile. You know what I mean? And then
Hmm.
we have this spiritual entity who is described as a reptile kind of creature in the book of Genesis. You know?
Yeah.
And it's doing the same thing around the world in all these ancient cultures. It's doing the same thing and giving information and giving technology and all these different
Yep.
things. But also the result is similar. It's like the fall of humanity. You know what I mean? All these like
Yeah.
cultures that were like gave themselves over to like these reptilian creatures, they don't exist anymore. You know what I mean? Like they're gone.
Yeah.
And
It's that initial burst, that initial rise, and then a gradual fall.
right, and sometimes the rise is great and wonderful, and it goes real high, and then boom, they're gone. And think about that because who's still around as a society. People like for longer, some of them longer than most. Is it's actually an argument that a lot of apologists use, like the Judeo-Christian worldview is so, or more like the ancient Jew, the ancient Jewish worldview. Not only are they still around, but it's one of those things where God has truly maintained the civilization, which is something that He promised He would do, unlike these
Yeah.
other civilizations. You know what I mean?
Yeah, exactly.
And so I find that incredibly interesting. But let's go. Towards the. Let's go to. You know what? I'm gonna skip this one because I really want people to listen to "Secret Demons" of Psalms 91.
Yes, yes,
Ooh,
yes.
that's a good episode, folks. You guys really got to get into that one. Also, you have another one called Azazel, leader of the Watchers and the king of the goat demons. I like that one because it kind of tells people who's Satan, who's Lucifer. You know what I mean? Who's all
Yeah.
these things? Like, because there's a confusion in there. Like a lot of people think that the Satan from Job, for example, is the Satan we know of traditionally. And it's not. So there's a lot of stuff like that. But I want to go through two more things. I want to go through your episode a little bit of the act of spiritual warfare, and Beelzebub, your latest one, and the throne of Satan. Okay.
Okay.
So let's talk about the act of spiritual warfare. What is that? And it says specifically here, baptism, the act of spiritual warfare. And most people might say, like, well, what do you mean exactly? So please, like, explain. What do you mean by that?
So basically, you can get a lot of this information in Unseen Realm. There's a chapter on this. But if you look into the words used for baptism, the word when describing it, I forget the exact verse, but it's described as a pledge, or basically a pledge of loyalty, or a pledge of allegiance. So it's a whole study based on that, and it's based on, okay, what is baptism? Does it actually save you? Because it said, there's a verse that says baptism saves you, but it saves you in the way of, it's a heart choice. It is you. So it's not saved as in salvation is the argument. It saves as in it like kind of, it's a heart choice that you made that allies yourself with God. Because if you say that baptism saves, you're adding to faith and grace. Basically, you're adding to saved by grace through faith. You're adding to that. So it's a work. So if you're adding a work to it, it doesn't make any sense. So I get into that, of how this doesn't actually save you in that same way. But it's actually when you are baptized, you are choosing your side publicly. You are entering the battle as a warrior now. And instead, you're in the battle regardless. You're like in the movies when you see there's a battle and there's people from the village running around, like scared, terrified. So you have that. That's what I would liken somebody who has not been baptized in this battle. Once you're baptized, you're ready to fight. You ally yourself with Yahweh. You say to the dark side that, hey, this is my team. And I get into infant baptism, and I get into all the different types of baptism, all the different methods of it. And that's basically it. The takeaway, is just that you are choosing your side in a holy war that's been going on since the beginning of time.
Right. And that's really interesting because I think we fail to logically see what salvation is, like logically consistent, and like like play it through. So one thing is you're becoming a citizen of the kingdom of God once you accept the Lord, and then you have to think about what that means. Citizen of the kingdom. You have to think in knights terms,
Exactly.
in those terms. Like, what does kingdom mean? You know what I mean? And when you start realizing what kingdom means, then you know what king means and what falls under uh, you being under a certain king, and what falls under me being part of that kingdom, and it starts to make a lot more sense as to what you should be doing and how we should be carrying ourselves when we realize, okay, I am now a citizen of this kingdom. What does that mean, and who is my king? Okay, Jesus is my king. Okay, cool. So now when you leave that kingdom, for example, you go outside of that kingdom or you go anywhere else where that kingdom is not there yet, you are a representation of that king, right? And
Exactly.
when you're doing that, if you represent yourself well, they're like, whoa, where are you from? And if you think about like these ancient times, like, or not ancient but older, like the times of the knights and all that stuff, and they're like, where are you from? Who is your king? And you tell them, oh, this is my king, because they're like, wow, well, look at how you carry yourself, look at how you are, and everything is defined by the way you carry yourself of that kingdom. You know what I'm saying? So then
And
that
you represent your king.
exactly. So that puts exactly. If you like, well, I don't know, watch all these other movies. I can only think of like Game of Thrones, for example. They'll say like, "Oh, he's from that kingdom." Like, "Oh, everyone from that kingdom is like a certain way or whatever." Like
Mhm.
immediately, it defines not just the king, but the kingdom as well, and how everyone else is there. And doesn't that happen a lot with us as believers? Like, oh, he's a Christian. Like, and when you do something that you're not supposed to be doing, when you're not representing the king as well as you should be,
Yeah.
does that not happen? Like, you're like, ooh, you know what I mean? And so, but all of that comes from where do you declare that you are from, right? And baptism is kind of like the seal of that, and you're declaring what side you are, and also you're part of that declaration of war against evil, right? And we have to keep that in mind. Like, oh, you're literally declaring war against evil beings, which are defeated through the authority that Jesus gave you already. So don't be scared, don't be afraid. But that's kind of my point. When you look into what all of these things mean, they almost we almost miss these meanings because we tend not to think a little bit deeper about what does that mean. Oh, I'm a citizen of the kingdom. Oh, well, what does that mean? What is a kingdom like? What is the king like? Like these things we don't think about, but the writer of that book is thinking about it. Like when you read something in the Bible, they're thinking about it. They say very specific words, like you said earlier in the beginning of the show. They'll use one word and it means three things. They do that
Yeah.
on purpose,
Yep.
because they're very, very. They have an amazing use of words, that is not, frankly, not even possible in the English language. At best, we can make things mean two things, for the most part, and if we're really good, we can, play with words and put some words together and make it mean more than that. But in the Hebrew, and especially in the Greek and the Hebrew language, oh my gosh, there's so much of that we miss because we don't do our word study. And this is part of it. Like baptism is much deeper than just like, all right, I repent of my sins. Let's dip you, and you're out, and you're saved now. And no, it's a bigger thing. I think one of the stories that kind of touches a little bit of that is the eunuch from Ethiopia. He was already a believer.
Yeah.
But it's like, hey, let me baptize you. Where you want to make this official and like be part of this kingdom? And it's like, yeah, let's do this. And so he didn't need it for salvation, right? I mean, he was there
Exactly. Yeah.
already saved, already a believer. But hey, he put him through that, you can say ritual, maybe for lack of a better word, to say like, hey, this is what's going on. And doesn't that happen also in like the knights, when a king
Exactly.
tries to knight you or makes you a part of his kingdom?
Exactly. When you kneel down and you get knighted. So this knight mindset is how I view the Bible. It's you if you view it from a medieval kind of mindset, and first of all, I would view it from the context of the culture that it was written in.
Mm-hmm.
But now, but I apply a lot of this through this knight filter because it makes sense like that. This ritual, this ceremony of induction, basically. And then, so you're in a spiritual war, and in a war, you have your enemies, and in a spiritual war, you have spiritual enemies. So in the baptism episode, which people they'll get into it there if they go watch it, I show you how baptism is linked to the Watchers, linked to these spiritual enemies. So that it's too long to get into that, but they can go check that out and see how it's linked to the Watchers. And then people are going to watch my episodes and be like, well, you link everything to the Watchers. I mean, they won't think that because I explained it in the episodes, but you would be surprised. These are the enemies. The Watchers and their offspring are the enemies. There are no other enemies besides this group of people and their offspring, basically.
These are the powers and principalities, man.
Yeah, no other enemies that we can find so far. I mean, I can't say definitively, but these are the enemies throughout the biblical text.
Cool. Okay, last thing I want to bring up, just because it has some other cultural relevance to today, and then we can plug anything that you want to plug, and of course mention all the books that you get this information from, so people can go and do their own research as well. And your recent episode is called Beelzebub and the Throne of Satan.
Yes.
And just expand on that. I'm sure you'll talk about what I want to talk about, and then I'll chime in whenever. But Beelzebub and the Throne of Satan. What's going on there?
Okay, so for that episode, I look into it's what I call monster profile. It's where I look into one of these dark Elohim, and I can't take it apart and see what's there. So Beelzebub is in the Bible, and it's when Jesus was healing people and casting out demons, and then the Pharisee said, "You cast out demons by the power of Beelzebub." And then Jesus says, if Satan casts out Satan, how can his kingdom stand? So he links Beelzebub to Satan. If you take it at face value, which I believe we should, he links Beelzebub to Satan. Now, to learn about Beelzebub, you have to go back and learn about Baal, who was, I think mentioned 60 times in the Old Testament alone. And he was the main. So when you think of Satan as the main enemy of God, Baal is mentioned more.
Right.
Throughout the text. Now, if what I do is I connect Baal to Beelzebub, because Beelzebub means Baal the prince. So they say you cast out demons by the power of Baal the prince. Now you find, and now Jesus himself links Baal the prince to Satan. So now you see, Satan is one of the main divine rebels, because he's known as Baal in this culture to all these people. He's known as Beelzebub, Baal the prince to this culture. And then from there, we connect Baal to Beelzebub to Satan, and we move on. And then we get to the throne of Satan, which is mentioned in another verse in Revelations 2, which talks about, I know where Satan dwells. I knows where he has his throne. And that was written to the church in Pergamum. Now, if you look at Pergamum, the only thing there that could be considered the throne would be the giant altar, the giant throne of the altar of Zeus. So that was the center of Zeus, and it was at Pergamum.
Right.
And so I get into all of what's going on at that throne, and how at the top of the throne there's a giant bull.
Right.
A bull for human sacrifice. And then I get into some history about Antipas, because in the verse in Revelations 12, or Revelations 2, it says, an Antipas, my faithful witness, and it also is translated as my faithful martyr. And I get into what happened with Antipas in that bull altar.
Yes, indeed. And like I said, in that episode, you also mentioned a little bit about why we need to realize that these altars or where they were built. You know what I mean? And I think people don't realize that God in the Old Testament, from the beginning, he's like, I have an abode, and it's on this mountain, right?
Yep.
And God, the Garden of Eden was like, I think Heiser might have coined the phrase. I'm not sure if he made it, but he talks about something that's called cosmic geography, right?
Yeah.
And in that, we see that God had a plan, like, this is where my abode is, which was Eden, the connection to humans and men, right? To men and God was on this mountain, and he named it Eden, right? And that's where God was, right? And so every time God, after they were casted out and that changed, but after there was another time, we think, for example, Moses, God spoke to him on a mountain, right? And then we have all these situations throughout the entire Old Testament where God meets humans on a mountain, right? And then we have similar stories of the lowercase g gods trying to do the same. And if not on a mountain, they would recreate something like a mountain, which we would perceive as pyramids or ziggurats. and different things like that. And they were basically just trying to knock off God, do the same thing, and say, okay,
Yeah.
well, he has his altar, we're going to make our altar, And it's interesting to me that theirs was, for the most part, had to be built. It was created. It was synthetic, you can say. You know what I mean?
Yep.
It wasn't made out of the creation itself, which is something that, creation itself screams out God's glory, right? And I just think that's a really good connection there, because God himself was always using something that he's already created, everything that's already set, in order to glorify him. You know what I mean? And these other beings always had to create these extra things in order to somehow copycat God. You know what I mean? And
yeah, these artificial mounts of assembly.
Indeed. And so that stuff, all that stuff you talked about a little bit more, and many other little details in your podcast. And let me just mention a couple more. I think this is where we're going to stop. But folks, check these titles out. Angel of the Lord and the Last of the Giant Slayers. I'm like, dude, how do you not want to listen to that? You know what I mean? That's a good. I got to take a little page out of Drew Goffey here, and then just rename our episodes and make them and do exclamations like you're doing, and some capital word, capital. Monster profile. Azazel, like you just did, leader of the Watchers and king of the goat demons. Book of Giants, animal human hybrids, right? We talked about those things. Earlier we said secret demons of Psalms 91 and the hidden 150. I forgot about that. And the hidden 151st Psalm.
Yeah, that was a cool one.
It was a cool one, man. And there's just a lot of information. I mean, we pretty much did a 2-hour episode right now, but it's only scratched the surface of the amount of information that he has in these episodes. And he always says, I got more to come, and you definitely do. You're very consistent with your episodes right now. Keep that up, because
I will. God willing, I will.
Yeah, because another page we need to take out of the Radical Christian Podcast, because we've been around 3 years and we've only done 42 episodes, about 50, because we do these things called fireside chats. But my point is it's been difficult to get these out, but now that I'm doing some of them on my own, then I can pump them out sooner. You know what I'm saying?
Yeah.
And so before we close this out, Drew, anything you want to get off your heart, your chest, that you want to just mention to the folks out there before we finish the episode, and anything you want to just say something that maybe you wanted to say and you didn't get to say, anything like that?
I will just say the books that people can read to go get a lot of this information, and a good starting point.
Mm-hmm.
A lot of the books I use for my stuff, you got to get The Unseen Realm by Michael Heiser. That is a must-have. Absolute
must.
Yes, and then his other book, Reversing Herman.
Yes,
I've used a lot for this. And then Derek Gilbert's work, which is amazing. His book, The Great Inception, which goes into all the mountains and everything that happens surrounding those mountains.
Okay.
And then The Last Clash of the Titans are the ones I've used. Now, I have his other book, which I haven't cracked open yet for the episodes, but that's a good starting point. The first two Derek Gilbert books and the first two Michael Heiser books, or the Unseen Realm and Reversing Herman, go get those, because those will give you a full layout of your intro to the supernatural realm, the unseen realm.
Mm-hmm, mm-hmm.
So people need to get that.
Unseen realm in and of itself is it's gonna give you biblical rabbit holes for the rest of your life.
Oh yeah, it is a great one.
I mean, it's up to you how deep you want to take it, folks. But really, there is so much information there. It's just amazing. But I think that's it. I think we did a really good, solid episode, man.
Yeah, and then the last thing is real quickly, I have a book coming out in the end of October.
Ooh, so yeah, that's right. No, plug all your stuff, man. You have a book coming out when?
The end of October. So
okay.
I'm joining the Daily Renegade team. That's with Josh Peck.
Okay.
And basically, my videos will start to be posted there, and I'll slowly transfer over to there. But me and him have been working on stuff, and he's like, "Hey, yeah." I told him I have a book written. He's like, "Hey, we need to publish this," because he read it and he really enjoyed it. Now, this book is like we talked about. You look at stuff. I look at stuff through a Knight's filter, because I was a Knight for 10 years, and I've always been drawn to that Knight stuff. But when you kind of apply stuff from the Bible with a medieval kind of mindset, a lot of it makes a lot of sense. Now, it's with that mindset that I came up with the warrior priest mindset. And this book is, I look into how everybody from the Bible, a lot of the major players are warriors and priests, and they have to have a balance of the two. Like David was more warrior than priest, and he couldn't build a temple because his hands were bloody. And then Solomon was more priest and warrior. So you have these dichotomies, I call them. Now, the main one that always stuck with me as a youth, and finally when I officially became a Christian, it just always stuck out to me, is the lion and the lamb. How Jesus came as the lion of the tribe of Judah and the sacrificial lamb. So it caused confusion because the Jews at the time, they heard the prophecies of these messiahs. They heard about the conquering king Messiah, and then who showed up? The suffering servant, the other side of the dichotomy. So when they saw that, they were just like, wait a minute, this is our guy. He's about to die. Like, this is the guy we've been waiting for. They didn't realize that there's two parts of it, and he would be coming later as the other part. But basically, there's a balance that every knight of Yahweh has to have. I get into that in the book. And then in the book too, before every paragraph, there's like a medieval story to kind of keep you in that medieval mindset. So it's a really fun book, and I'm excited to have that out. It's going to be with Renegade Publishing at the end of October. So
Indeed.
it's a lot of the same stuff. It's like the medieval radical Christian, basically.
Okay, very, very good. So when that comes out, let's have you back on the show and let's talk about your book, man.
Let's do it.
All right, sweet, dude. So where can they find you, Drew? If people want to get a hold of you, they want to listen to your show, whatever it is you want to let people know, where they can kind of find you, just why don't you plug that right now?
All right, so right now, my email is radicalchristiandrew@gmail. If anyone has questions or want to contact me about anything, my channel is called The Radical Christian. It's on all podcast platforms, and it's on YouTube. Now, I think starting next week, I will start to migrate my videos over and start posting on the Daily Renegade YouTube channel. So it's just the Daily Renegade. Now, I will post on my channel to let people know. So to clarify, my channel is The Radical Christian, and I'll put a video on there letting people know that I will be going to the Daily Renegade. And that's a really cool group of people. They're really about unity and not dividing over disagreements like we mentioned earlier. And God's doing something great with them, and I'm glad to be a part of that. So that's kind of where you could find me.
Sweet, man. That's good stuff. All right, Drew, stick with me, and let's let these folks listen to some cool tunes. We'll be right back.